It's hard to compartmentalize that Hunter x Hunter started its tenure in the 90s, because it very much feels like a commentary on the shonen tropes it would inspire. And I don't just mean it's critical or deconstructive, because I don't think it's trying to be. In fact, I think it not only revels in those conventions, but also takes them to their natural endpoints. You see, I really liked Yu Yu Hakusho. For all of its faults near the end, it is a very endearing story, because Togashi has a real knack for making every character feel like genuine people, guys that you could actually meet. This plays into the themes of the story pretty well, that we like to subjugate those who we share ambitions with. As much as he wanted to explore that even more, Shonen Jump take a lot of pride in their terrible storytelling, so a story as real or even as dark as Yu Yu was shaking up to be just wouldn't fit in the mold. I think that's why Hunter x Hunter has those commonalities with the magazine's past and present outings. It's the story that the magazine wanted Togashi to make in the first place, but as the story continues, it seems to be asking what if these fantastical elements, these plucky archetypes, and this larger-than-life story for kids existed in the real world? What if that classic indomitable human spirit was shown as a bad thing? What if a child was forced to grow out of his self-centeredness because his worldview was shown to be hypocritical and flawed? What if the star of that revenge subplot was continuously isolated because of his ambitions? What if the kid stricken with self-worth issues actually got to address it? Seriously, you guys think this is okay? Shonen characters nowadays have a problem with being selfish. More so that they aren't selfish enough. They don't look out for themselves, especially compared to their predecessors. However, that selfishness, that stubbornness that allows you to cling to your life and your dreams is the very reason why we, in the real world, can't connect to each other, why we destroy each other. Our hubris is our worst enemy. Togashi likens animals and beasts to be better than us because any action from them exists purely from instincts. However, we choose to be awful to each other. And the only thing that's so great about being a human is that we can realize that and change. JJK's characters don't work. They can't work. They're not given enough time to work. For example, the trio is formed and then separated as soon as they become real friends. The downfall of Ghetto is sped run and hidden inventory. Gojo comes out of the box, dies, and doesn't even recognize the tragedy of Shibuya. Maki carries on the love of a sister we barely knew, and if you're at all related or affectionate towards Megumi, good luck even being on screen. But there are more subtle things. We're told the kids from Kyoto have a bond that is inseparable, even if they have their own values and truths, and yet the only person we really get to know is Todo. I mean, if it wasn't for the insanity that was the Gainax-inspired mech episode, I would still be rolling my eyes to people who actually felt sorry for Mekamaru. In fact, I question the necessity for the school setting in the first place. Of course, it's an analogy for the conservative world, and who better to indoctrinate traditions into children than the education system. But schools can be much more than that. They can be opportunities for socializing and being taught important history. It's honestly really disappointing that most of the teachers we see have a more go-get-em teaching style rather than something that would require more occasions that necessitate sitting down in one place. I mean, Gojo doesn't even talk nor gas up half of his students, and I don't even know what Udahime's deal is, but whatever, we're so far removed from Jujutsu High that it doesn't bother me anymore. What matters are the factions and people that we're left with. Now we're left with the Culling Games, an arc filled to the brim with gag characters of one-note personalities that either die anyway or encourage intrigue before dying. And now the only protagonists we have left to root for are people like Choso and Hikari. Great. When the series killed off its secondary antagonist, Kenjaku, I felt a sense of hopelessness. Jujutsu Kaisen's graveyard gets more and more steep as time passes, and at a certain point, I must ask, how many characters must pass away for the story's themes and messages to be fully realized? JJK explores its themes through the depth of its cast members, through the harsh reality of its world, and the forced individuality that comes from sorcery. I understand that. But what's the point of caring about that individuality, that harsh reality, if the characters we're seeing the world through keep disappearing? The best way to communicate an idea in the story is through character, but there's no one left to communicate the ideas through. Jujutsu Kaisen's cast elicits intrigue that is cut short because of the lack of screen time the characters have when alive, and the deaths that come to them way too early. And I don't think that should be excused because of JJK's subtextual themes. The problem with overvaluing subtext in a story is that it puts emphasis on the message rather than how that message comes across, excusing the actual happenings in the plot because of what you think the plot is trying to say. Like, hey Naya, did you know that it's totally fine if a bunch of characters from Bleach get underutilized or encouraged to stay stagnant because the whole thing is a metaphor for enlightenment and nirvana? Like, okay. When your story is so centered around its cast that the world literally moves because of them, or we see more of the world because of them, it leads to a much more satisfying and enriching experience. When your story is the character, or the characters that are in it, it's immediately much more engaging. Jujutsu Kaisen knows this. It's not a plot-driven story. The story is only happening because of the ideals of a character and how the rest of the cast react to those ideals. The only reason JJK feels like it's plot-driven to so many people is because it's notorious for neglecting its own characters, despite those characters being so influential on the movement of the narrative.
Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Please open his mouth.
Guts and Griffith differ in a lot of ways. Griffith is a futurist. He saw a castle he can never reach and wanted his own. He's creating his own kingdom as we speak, but he doesn't want to stop there. But the thing about such a great ambition is that it can't exist without a cost. There's nothing wrong with aiming towards the heavens, but a crossroad is made. When the time comes for you to choose between the present that you know, surrounded by the people that you love, or the future at the sacrifice of those same people, which would you pick? It's a story that's oddly critical of being passionate. In fact, it's a lot like Hunter x Hunter in that regard. When you're so zeroed in on your purpose, you forget that the pit stops on your adventure are just as important as your end goal. Berserk tells you that sometimes striving for perfection within yourself disables you from being content with who you are and where you are and who you're surrounded by. I have imposter syndrome. Like, it's fine. I'm fine, but it keeps me from realizing my own potential at times. The fact I have a passion that I can't execute because of my own circumstances and mental state. I also acknowledge I'm not the most consistent uploader or even the best content creator. That eats me up inside, and like, telling that to a self-conscious person like me, it really helped me put things into perspective. When I say Jujutsu Kaisen fails as a story, this is what I mean. In trying to be subversive and deconstructive, it misses something. It misses that genuine connection someone can have with a piece of work. It misses the connection an author can have with their audience. We come so close to prying open the brain of Akutami, learning about him and learning about ourselves through him, and then he severs that feeling almost instantly. I can't be invested if you don't let me. Berserk shows you can have a dark story that's simple and still delivers a gut-wrenching and emotional story that even guides someone like me into being a better version of myself. Hunter x Hunter shows that you can be self-indulgent, deep, intricate, and still deliver a thought-out, character-driven story that pays attention to the needs of its cast members. Both of these stories have something Jujutsu Kaisen severely lacks: the heart to care about the very characters it torments and traps in the cycle of Sukuna, and the will to do anything about it or to show why that torment would even be worth it in the first place. And when you bring that up, when you point out how Jujutsu Kaisen is written unconventionally, you're putting a lid on how stories should be written. But you know what? Maybe we should.